Pack your things and get out. I want you gone before my parents get home. Lyra said it like she was talking to a dog that had chewed the wrong shoe. No tremor in her voice, no hesitation, just that flat, clean cruelty that takes years to develop. Wren stood in the kitchen doorway, still holding a dish towel, still processing the sentence like it was in a language she almost knew. They had been together for 3 years. She had moved into his apartment, Lyra's family's apartment, technically, the one they let her use rent-free in River North. 18 months ago, she had organized the closets, learned how he liked his coffee, stopped apologizing for how much she read. You heard me, Lyra said. Wren set the dish towel down on the counter, folded it, because that's what she did when she didn't know what else to do. I don't understand what's happening, she said. I'm ending this. Lyra picked up her phone, scrolled through something, set it back down face up. It's not complicated. You work at a nonprofit. You make $42,000 a year. You wear shoes from Target. I've been patient. Patient. The word landed wrong in Wren's chest. She had been there when Lyra's father had his first cardiac episode, sat in the hospital corridor for 6 hours, held her hand in the elevator on the way up to the ICU. Lyra had cried into her shoulder in a way she'd never let anyone else see. Wren had thought that meant something. Apparently, patience had a different definition. This is about money, Wren said. It wasn't really a question. It's about where this goes. You don't have ambition, Wren. You save sea turtles and attend city council meetings about zoning. I need someone who's going somewhere. Lyra paused, tilted her head. The way she did when she thought she was being reasonable. Cord asked me to dinner last week. He just made partner at his firm. Cord, of course. Wren looked around the apartment, the throw blanket she had picked out at a vintage market on Damen Avenue. The small framed photo of her grandmother on the bookshelf. She had brought it because she liked having it near her when she slept. The basil plant on the windowsill she had kept alive for 11 months through 2 heat waves and a broken thermostat. She thought about asking for more time, about making a case for herself the way she made cases for things she believed in. Water rights, school funding, the apartment building on Halstead that the city was trying to tear down. She did not make a case. She took the photo of her grandmother. She left the basil plant. She told herself it was because she couldn't carry it on the L, but the truth was she just couldn't look at it. She was out in 40 minutes. It was already dark by the time Wren got to her friend's place in Pilsen. Gwen opened the door in paint-stained jeans and didn't ask questions, just pulled her inside and made tea and sat across from her on the couch, while the radiator clicked and hissed. She said you weren't ambitious enough. She said I didn't have ambition, Wren corrected, because the distinction mattered to her even now. Wit is different. One means I'm lazy, the other means I want the wrong things. Gwen wrapped both hands around her mug. What do you want? Wren looked at the ceiling. There was a water stain shaped roughly like Michigan. I want the Delray Corridor project to pass. I want the city to stop bulldozing affordable housing and calling it development. She stopped. I want to stop explaining why that matters to people who already decided it doesn't. Gwen nodded. She was an artist. She understood wanting things that didn't come with stock options. Wren slept on Gwen's couch for 6 nights. On the 7th, she signed a lease on a studio in Logan Square that cost her exactly 2/3 of her monthly take-home. The bathroom had a window painted shut and a radiator that knocked like someone was trapped inside it. She bought a new basil plant at the farmer's market on Saturday. She went back to work on Monday. The Delray Corridor was a 4-block stretch of the South Side that had been quietly strangled for a decade. First, the grocery store closed, then the pharmacy, then the elementary school consolidated with another campus 2 miles away, which meant kids crossing a highway, which meant parents choosing differently when they could, which meant more vacancy, which meant more disinvestment. The city called it natural attrition. Wren called it what it was. She had been working the project for 2 years before she met Lyra. She would be working it after. The organization was called the Meridian Housing Alliance. 11 full-time staff, a budget that required creativity, a director named Birch who wore the same gray cardigan every Monday and kept a photograph of the Cabrini Green Towers on his wall, not as nostalgia, but as a reminder of what happened when people stopped paying attention. Wren's job, technically, was community engagement. In practice, it meant she spent 3 evenings a week in church basements and library conference rooms, listening to people describe their neighborhoods as they were, and as they used to be, and as they were afraid they would never be again. She wrote reports. She gave presentations to city officials who nodded carefully and did nothing. She filed public comments and FOIA requests, and once, memorably, organized 47 residents to show up to a zoning board meeting in matching yellow shirts. The shirts had been Gwen's idea. The Monday after she left Lyra's apartment, Wren walked into the office and found a message from a law firm she had never heard of. It was not unusual to hear from law firms. What was unusual was the name on the letterhead: Aldrin and Cole. Named partners: Aldrin Whitmore and a third partner, recently elevated. The firm represented a development company called Stellargate Holdings. Stellargate Holdings, the letter explained, was interested in the Delray corridor. Not in the way Wren was interested. She pulled every public record she could find on Stellargate Holdings in 3 days. Corporate registrations, property filings, city contracts. Their portfolio read like a greatest hits of displacement. A mixed-use development in Bronzeville, where the promised affordable units never materialized. A revitalization project in Little Village that had raised 32 businesses and replaced them with a parking structure and 6 luxury condos. A partnership with the city's planning department, formalized 2 years ago, that gave them right of first refusal on 4 parcels of public land. One of those parcels was in the Delray corridor. Wren stayed late. She made coffee that tasted like burnt ambition. She built a timeline on a corkboard in the back office that Birch used for storage, because the main office didn't have enough wall space. She connected dates to filings, to council votes, to names. One name kept appearing: Harland Quill. Quill was listed as a passive investor in Stellargate's parent company, a holding entity registered in Delaware. Not an officer, not a signatory, not anyone you'd notice if you were moving quickly. She only found him because she wasn't. She Googled him at 11:15 on a Thursday night, sitting cross-legged on the floor of the storage room, with a cold cup of coffee and a highlighter she had been clicking open and closed for an hour. Harland Quill, 61, former real estate attorney, current managing partner of the Quill Group, a private equity firm with interests in healthcare, logistics, and urban development. Board member of 3 nonprofits, including the city's Affordable Housing Commission. He was on the Affordable Housing Commission. He was a passive investor in a company trying to displace the corridor she had spent 2 years protecting. She clicked the highlighter one more time and sat very still. The Planning Commission meeting was on a Tuesday. Wren knew the room: 3rd floor of City Hall, fluorescent lights, chairs that suggested the designers wanted attendees to leave. And she knew the agenda. The vote on the Delray parcel transfer was item 7 of 11. She arrived early. There were 12 people in the room when she got there. By the time the meeting started, there were 40. 31 of them had come with her. Residents, business owners, a woman who ran a daycare out of her living room and had been on the corridor for 19 years. They sat in the chairs and stood along the walls and carried folders that Wren had assembled with the documents she had found. Item 7 came up at 2:15. The commission chair introduced it as a routine land transfer, beneficial development opportunity, market rate investment. All the right phrases. Wren was the 4th person to approach the public comment microphone. She had 3 minutes. She used all of them. She described the Stellargate portfolio. She named the Bronzeville project, where the affordable units were reclassified as market rate 18 months after completion. She described Harland Quill's presence on the Affordable Housing Commission while holding a passive investment stake in a company seeking preferential land transfers from that same commission. The room was quiet in a particular way. The way rooms get quiet when information changes the shape of the air. The commission chair asked her to repeat the last part. She did. One of the commission members, a man named Ferris, who had been on the board for 11 years, and who Wren had always suspected of being exactly this kind of useful, started reviewing something on his tablet. His face did not change, but his posture did. The vote was tabled. The story took 3 weeks to go anywhere. That's how these things worked, in Wren's experience. You put something true into the world, and then you waited for the world to decide what to do with it. She went back to church basements and library meetings. She kept her phone on at night. It was Gwen who texted her the link at 6:47 on a Thursday morning. The Tribune piece was 13 paragraphs. Harland Quill's name was in the second one. By the seventh paragraph, it had company, 2 aldermen, a deputy planning commissioner, and a city contractor who had been awarded 7 figures in infrastructure work. During the same period, the Quill Group had been building its Stellargate position. Quill resigned from the Affordable Housing Commission by 9 a.m. By noon, the Stellargate land transfer had been formally withdrawn. Wren read the article standing at the kitchen counter in her Logan Square apartment, still in the oversized shirt she'd slept in, still holding her phone with both hands, because she didn't quite trust herself to hold it with one. The basil plant was on the windowsill behind her. It had grown considerably in the past 2 months. She didn't tell anyone what she was feeling right then. She wasn't sure she had a word for it. It wasn't joy exactly. It was something more like confirmation, like the physical sensation of being right about something you'd spent years being told you were wrong about. She found out about the award the same way she found out about most things, an email she almost didn't open because the subject line looked like spam. It was from the National Community Land Trust Network. There was a program she had applied to 18 months ago, during a stretch of weeks, when the Delray project felt stalled, and she had needed to believe there were other people doing the same kind of work. She had sent in her application, heard nothing, and assumed the answer was no. The answer, as it turned out, had been processing. The Meridian Alliance had been selected. The award included a 5-year grant, a convening in Washington, and something that took Wren 3 readings to understand: a formal partnership with the City of Chicago's Department of Planning and Development, effective the following fiscal year, that would give the Alliance a seat at the table on all future corridor-level development decisions affecting communities they served. A seat at the table. Permanently. Birch was in a meeting when she got the email. She knocked on his glass door, which she had never done in 3 years, and held up her phone. He read it, read it again, took off his glasses. "Wren," he said. "Yeah," she said. "This is yeah." He put his glasses back on. "I'm going to need you to send that to the board." She sent it to the board. Then she went to the back office with the corkboard on the wall and stood in front of the timeline she had built and looked at it for a long time. The Tribune did a follow-up piece 6 weeks later: community organization, corruption investigation, federal partnership. It was a clean narrative arc, and the reporter knew it. He called Wren for comment, which she gave, carefully. He asked for a photo. She wore the same jacket she'd worn to the zoning board meeting with the yellow shirts. It was a deliberate choice. The story ran on a Sunday. The headline described her as a watchdog advocate. The photo caught her mid-sentence, talking to a woman in her 70s outside the church on 63rd, where they held their Tuesday meetings. Wren was gesturing at something off-frame. She was wearing the jacket. She looked like someone who had just gotten started. Lyra called on a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after the piece ran. Wren was at the Logan Square Farmers Market when her phone buzzed. She looked at the name. She stood next to a table of honey and beeswax candles and held the phone while it rang. She let it go to voicemail. She had been waiting, she realized, to feel some version of the satisfaction she'd imagined during those 6 nights on Gwen's couch. The vindication sequence, the scene where the person who had looked at you and found you insufficient sees who you actually are. But standing there with the farmer's market noise around her, someone arguing affably about heirloom tomatoes, a dog barking at nothing, the smell of bread from the bakery tent, she didn't feel like she was in anyone else's story anymore. She bought a jar of honey and walked back through the market. She never listened to the voicemail. The formal partnership launch was held in a conference room in the planning department's offices in March. There were people in suits who shook her hand and said her name, the way people say names they've learned to say correctly. There was a sign on the easel by the door that read Meridian Alliance, City Partnership Inaugural Meeting. Birch gave a short speech. One of the federal program officers gave a longer one. Then it was Wren's turn. She had written something. She had practiced it. She looked out at the room. City officials, community members, a journalist, 3 aldermen who had been notably quiet during the Quill period and were now notably present. And she set her notes down on the table. "I want to start with a name," she said. Her name was Odette Tess Sims. She was 82 years old. She had lived in the same house on Avalon Avenue for 51 years. When the first Stellargate proposal went to committee, her block was inside the impact zone. She came to every single meeting. She brought handwritten notes in a composition book. She died in November, before any of this. Wren paused. She never saw the vote tabled. She didn't know about the investigation. She didn't know about this room. The room was doing that thing again. That particular quality of quiet. This is for people like Odette, Wren said. People who do the work without knowing if it's going to matter. That's all any of us can do. You show up, you document, you keep going. And sometimes, not always, not often enough, it matters. She picked up her notes. She didn't use them. The applause started slow and then wasn't slow anymore. After the meeting, she stood by the window on the 3rd floor looking out at the city. It was one of those March days where the light changes its mind every 20 minutes. Gray, then sudden gold, then gray again. Lake Michigan was a cold flat line in the distance. Gwen texted. How'd it Gorn typed back. Good. Really good. Then she put her phone in her pocket and stood there a minute longer, watching the light do what it was going to do regardless. The most overlooked people in any room, she had come to believe, were the ones who didn't need the room to know their name. They already knew who they were just there to do the work. She turned away from the window. There was still a lot of it left to do.